Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is a very gruesome and horrific case. It is the case of Darlene Prioriello. It was suggested to me by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you do have any more, please do let me know. Darlene Nikki Prioriello, was also known as Dolly sometimes, was born on the 2nd of July in 1965 to parents Nicholas and Helen. Now, I do know at some point along the line she ended up having a stepfather called Gerald, so obviously her parents must have split up at some point. And she also had 3 siblings, Anthony, Teresa and Nicholas. She was from Toronto in Canada. And she was just a typical teenage girl. She'd recently been allowed, when this case happened, she was 16. So she'd recently been allowed to see boys and things like that. She did have a curfew of 11, so she had to be back by then. But, you know, she was living her life, going to school, just such a lovely, lovely girl. And what happened to her was beyond, honestly, beyond horrific, really. There's pictures online as well. So for anyone that wants to go and look at them, you know, they're available, but be warned, they are very disturbing and very graphic. Obviously, I'm not going to put them in this video out of respect for the family, just honestly. But they're there if you want to go and look them up, but just be warned, you know, that they're not nice to look at. So anyway, let's go back to the 6th of May in 1982. Darlene was with her boyfriend and, you know, they'd spent the evening together. It was 10 o'clock. And her curfew was 11, and so she decided that she was gonna head home. Well, begin heading home. So she kissed her boyfriend goodnight, and she started on her journey. But sadly, she never made it home from that journey. After her curfew went by and she was not seen, her family obviously started panicking, and she just basically gone missing. In that time frame of 10 till like 11 when her curfew was, she just never came home. So obviously her family were panicked and everyone was really worried about Darlene. Nobody actually knew that what had happened to her within that hour was absolutely monstrous. Then the next morning, a factory worker makes a phone call and he called himself Fred, and he said that there was a body out behind this old building. The police obviously go out, and apparently the first 2 police officers to arrive on the job were actually pretty new to the job. They'd only been on it like a year. And honestly, what they found deeply disturbed them, to the point where one actually quit and never looked back, and the other took a desk job because he just could not. After seeing her body, he could not deal anymore, and he didn't want to have to go through anything like that ever again. And so, yeah, they ended up sort of taking totally different career routes because of that. And as bad as that was, and I mean it was bad, just, it gets even more sick because the person that actually did this to this, well, at the time it was an unknown female, obviously. I mean, you guys know it's Darlene. It was Darlene. But who actually did this to Darlene was looking out of a nearby window and watching them remove her body and be on the scene and everything else, and getting satisfaction from that, if you know what I mean, which is just disgusting. So like I said, it was determined that it was Darlene. It was determined that she had basically died due to blunt force trauma, but there was a hell of a lot of other things that happened to her. She'd been sexually assaulted. This is all within the hour that she left, like, her boyfriend's. Well, in fact, before that, after she left her boyfriend, she went to Burger King. She ate there, and she was like sat outside of Burger King. And this is when she sadly had a lapse of judgment, because she ended up getting in someone's car, someone who she actually knew, like, in passing. But even though she knew this guy, you know, honestly, she really should not have got in. Not that she knew at the time, of course, and it's heartbreaking, all of this case. But yeah, she was worried about getting home for a curfew on time, and so she jumped in a car with someone who she thought she knew, but she really didn't know. So as the police are looking into trying to find who did this horrific crime, obviously her family are completely devastated at finding out, you know, that Darlene was missing and now she is deceased. It's awful to even imagine. And then something very strange happens. A phone call comes through to a lead detective who basically is the killer and says that he admits that he's the killer. He doesn't say who he is, obviously. But he says that he's going to also send this letter in and detail exactly what happened that night. And he does. He sends in this letter to a overnight book return place along with Darlene's necklace. And in it, he gives a very graphic, very detailed description of what he did to Darlene that night. And honestly, it's beyond disturbing. Like, it's really, really awful. He ended up basically torturing her. So he said initially that she was hitchhiking, which it isn't believed. Not that she was necessarily hitchhiking, but that she was sat outside the Burger King. He was out prowling because he was looking for someone to basically have a sexual relation with because he'd not done it before. He was a virgin, you see, apparently. So that's what it's like he was out doing, like prowling around. And he spots Darlene, who's sat outside of a Burger King. And so he pulls up, he invites her into his car, and like I said, Darlene, she did know him. Lapse of judgment, she got in thinking, I'm going to be late for curfew, I don't want to be late for curfew, can you take me to this place? So she wasn't necessarily hitchhiking, but, you know, that's what this letter claimed. So anyway, this letter went on to say about how this person drove her around, pretended that he was going to take her to wherever she wanted to be, then ended up driving past it, driving past all the stop signs, driving past everything, because he didn't want to stop. He didn't want her to jump out because he was moving. When she realised that he wasn't taking her where she wanted to go. And then he basically took her to some woods and lunged for her and basically said that all he wanted was sex. And then it goes on into slightly intricate details about that. And I don't know whether this is true or whether this person is just saying it, but basically saying that she went along with it. Again, I cannot comment on that because I have no idea. But this is what the letter said, that she went along with it, but basically said that she didn't want to get pregnant. And so he was like, yeah, I'll bear that in mind. And then once it was all done, she wanted to sit in the front seat. So he held on to her as she got out so she couldn't run. She gets into the front seat. Well, as she's getting in the front seat, he leans over and says, I've got a present for you. And he pulls out a brick. And then she starts screaming because obviously she's now even more terrified as to what this person's going to do to her with this brick. And he basically whacks her over the head and says, like, now you can't get pregnant. And the letter really does go on in more detail. I'm not going to read it all out. I might put a picture of it in so that you guys can read it if you choose to do so. But yeah, I'm not going to read out the intricate details. But he basically hit her over the head with a brick. He sexually assaulted her. He hit her with a sort of piece of wood that he found with nails in, so he smacked her with that loads of times. He tried to bite off her nipples and set her on fire in certain areas and urinated on her. Honestly, just the disgrace and disrespect from this person is just so awful, all the while she's begging and pleading for her life. He ended up finishing her off by dropping a 66-pound breeze block on top of her head. And then at the very end of the letter, he said that he would carry on, he would strike again, and basically signed it with, catch me if you can. And, you know, it didn't really take him long to catch him. Yeah, thank God. Because some factory worker basically went and told the boss about this guy who was fairly new. He was 17 years old. She found him basically pleasing himself in the workspace. So obviously, nobody wants that. So the manager goes down and finds all of these newspaper clippings about Darlene and her horrific murder. So, you know, he's basically pleasing himself to them. And obviously, they contact the police with that information. This guy was called David James Dobson. He was a recent hire of the place. You know, he had actually been kicked out of school for bullying, tormenting teachers. Honestly, there was a very troubled background behind him, very troubled. And he was huge as well. So he was this massive guy. He looked like a man. He had a full beard at the age of 17 and he was enormous. And he was just a very highly strange, deranged and disturbed individual. So because they found this, it gave them a reason to be able to tap the factory phones. And obviously they're going to wait on that coming back, which did reveal information to them later on, which we'll get into. And eventually they did go and arrest him. He was at home. He was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when they walked in. Not caring in the world, basically. Which is also something else that they could use as evidence, because they actually got a dental imprint off Darlene's body. I believe around her breast area, obviously with what he tried to do. And they would use that dental imprint along with the dental imprint of the sandwich to get a match, along with all this other evidence. They did this new technique that apparently you spray this body with this stuff and it's a 1 in 1,000 chance of it actually bringing up a fingerprint. And it did. It brought up a fingerprint on Darlene's thigh. And guess what? It matched his fingerprints. So yeah, it was very clear that he did it. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Darlene Prioriello. Oh, as well, how I said with the sandwich, how he really didn't seem to give a damn. He literally said to the cops, "Do I have time for another glass of milk?" Honestly, he just had no remorse whatsoever for what he'd done anyway. So when they actually went and spoke to people that knew Dave as well as getting his troubled background, you know, they would find out that he was often known for bullying kids that were younger than him, smaller than him. Obviously, it was pretty hard to not be smaller than him. He was like 6-foot giant with a massive beard. He looked really a lot older than he was. And he had a weird fascination with all these different things. Just the way he got his kicks, as you can tell, very gross. Then the police got back their phone taps and they found out that he was also ringing around everyone in the phone book that was called Prioriello. I apologise if I said that name wrong. I've heard it said a few different times. I've probably got it wrong. So I don't mean any offence by that. I'm rubbish. But yeah, he rang around all of those to try and find Darlene's parents. And not only that, he rang around all of the funeral homes too. He was obsessed with what he had done. So basically, when he went to trial, he did admit to murdering Darlene, but they wanted him for first-degree murder, and he basically said that it was second-degree murder. His defense tried to say that it was a crime of passion, but let me tell you, once I handed those photos round of the crime scene, everyone knew that it was not a crime of passion, not even remotely, and he was charged unanimously, basically. And not only that, with all the evidence that they had his fingerprint on a body, they had all of, obviously, him ringing around all the Prioriellos, his obsession with the newspaper clippings and things like that. They also had a brick, like, that he'd taken a memento of the brick that he'd dropped on her, I think. So he'd kept that too. They had a mountain of evidence against him, and, you know, there was no real saying that he didn't do it anyway. Like I said, the defense were just trying to get, I guess, a lighter sentence, which didn't work, thankfully. So he got like a life sentence, but like 25 years. And he was sent to one of Canada's toughest prisons, apparently. And then all these years later, he appeared on the TV in an interview, because obviously he was going on about parole and stuff. I believe it was 2007. He's going on about how he's found God in prison and all this. And he's like this great model inmate on the telly and on the interviews, but that's not actually true, because he was, I believe, threatening the Prioriello, saying that when he gets out he's going to go and see them. He's threatened their lives through his sister. You know, he wasn't all this model inmate who's now found God and totally reformed like he was pretending to be. And he was going on about how he didn't want parole as well, because he didn't want to put the victim's family through it, and when the board felt that it was right that he could be released, you know, he wouldn't ever press it and this, that and the other. But apparently it came out that actually he had a friend in prison, and that was the reason that he wanted to stay in, not because he was worried about what the families might think, like the family of his victims and stuff, like his victim and things like that. It was like his first serious relationship, and this other person was a convicted murderer too, apparently. And, you know, that's why I wanted to stay in, not because of out of respect for his victim's family, like he pretended. And apparently, it seems like nobody will have to worry about him getting out, because there was also some leaked information that claimed that he is not a well man. He either has AIDS or cancer from the sounds of it. Probably, I don't know if it's terminal or what, but basically people are thinking that he will never ever be able to walk free, that, you know, whichever disease it is will probably claim his life. And I mean, he's a piece of crap, so I have no qualms about that. I hope it does. I hope he doesn't ever get out, because what he did to Darlene was absolutely disgusting. And he is just an absolute monster. There's just no other way to say it. He rots in jail forever, honestly. So yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. That was a bit late, but there you go. And yeah, that is all I have today on the case of Darlene Prioriello. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.